Morning. So Elon Musk has purchased Twitter, or so it seems, or at least the deal sounds somewhat finalized. And it's I guess entertaining to watch kind of the establishment blue checkmark Twitter meltdown that's happening. All the people that were saying, it's a private platform when there were complaints about censorship are now, upset about the fact that it's a private platform and that Elon Musk is taking it private and doing with his private property as he likes. All that said, I'm actually not like a huge Elon Musk fan. I mean, I think he's a fascinating personality, and certainly he's quite the successful entrepreneur. It looks like, at least outwardly, everything he touches turns to gold. But I kind of feel like it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, PayPal, I don't think he's even a part of PayPal anymore, but he was one of the founders, right? Anyway, PayPal is, certainly a thing. And that's a big deal. And to be sure, Tesla makes a lot of cars, and that's real. And there were a lot of naysayers about Tesla. I remember reading about the Roadster when it first came out and thinking it was cool. And now, especially around Oregon, it seems like everybody has one, or not everybody, but a lot of people have them. And it is kind of the popular electrical vehicle option that's out there right now. But, just generally speaking, I'm really kind of skeptical about, practically speaking, everything he does. And I'm by no means an expert on, rocket science or, material science when it comes to, batteries or electric vehicles and renewables or, Hyperloop sort of technology or, Starlink, satellite-based internet, all these things. They're very grandiose sounding. And like I said, there was a lot of people who poo-pooed Tesla in the beginning, and I think they're being proven wrong, that it was a viable business there. But I think a lot of it's actually smoke and mirrors, and that much like the Donald, Elon Musk is an expert at branding. And that, granted, he doesn't actually put his name all over everything, but he's the marketing and branding angle of everything he does is just highly successful. And I think that's largely as deep as it goes. When you look at electrical vehicle technology as it stands right now, or renewables generally, as far as my layman knowledge takes me, and I admittedly out of my depth here in some respects, but the energy density of batteries versus fossil fuels is still not comparable, and the ecological impact of the production process for lithium-ion batteries is horrendous. And I think anybody who looks honestly at a comparison, fossil fuels versus battery electric storage and quote unquote renewable energy, I think at best you're at a wash as far as ecological impact. Now there's a lot of concern specifically about carbon footprint, which is maybe a different conversation than, say, the impact of lithium mining on the environment generally. And so it's not a one-to-one comparison, but generally speaking, I don't think one is necessarily superior than the other, which isn't to say it couldn't be, and we should be striving for all sorts of technological advancement, and batteries can and will get better. But ultimately, I don't know if you're going to reach an energy density level with batteries that makes it truly competitive with gas-powered vehicles in any near time frame. And it's going to end up being kind of like fusion power has been only 30 years away for the last however however many decades, right? And never really quite getting there. Especially when you talk about grid level storage. I mean, the amount of batteries you need. And I mean, there was actually an interview with Elon Musk talking about like 400 terawatt hours or some just massive amount of grid level storage that would be necessary to make broad scale use of renewables viable. It's not going to happen. And I think we will have other innovations that render the need for grid level storage really actually obsolete, especially when fusion does inevitably get cracked. And as a friend pointed out, thanks Jonathan, the issue with batteries is like a material science problem, right? Like, we don't know how to make the battery yet, right? We don't know what materials to use and how to actually store it, even theoretically at this point. But fusion power, it's no longer a physics problem, right? It's a engineering problem. Like, we know the physics works. That's all been worked out. We can actually create fusion reactions, massive ones, in fact, with fusion bombs. But it's an engineering problem, right? How do you contain a self-sustaining fusion reaction long term at the just atrociously high energy states required for you to get net energy gain out of the reaction, right? And so there's something called ITER, or it's like the International Tokamak Energy Reactor. I forget what the acronym stands for, but basically it's this huge fusion reactor they're building in France, and it's an international cooperative thing, and it's just billions and billions of dollars, and the thing is massive. I mean, they're still building it, but I mean, that's going to be the proof of concept when it comes online, that you A, can have energy net positive fusion reaction, and B, sustain it over a long period of time in like a commercially viable way. And I don't think ITER actually is even going to be like a commercial reactor, quote unquote. It's still a prototype. But once you have the proof of concept, well, then if people want to pay for the just massive front end cost, what you get on the back end is just basically free energy. I mean, not quite, but the amount of materials that you need to gather to run a fusion reactor is just a pittance. I mean, it's some of the most abundant substances in the universe. Again, you need hydrogen, right? And it depends on what kind of fusion process you're using. And again, I'm not a physicist that is well versed in fusion, but there's different forms of fusion, right? You're smashing atoms together, and you get a big release of energy in the process, right? And so it depends on which sorts of atoms you're smashing together. And so there's like deuterium and tritium and different other isotopes of hydrogen that you can use to create this fusion reaction, right? And they're highly abundant, right? So we're not going to run into scarcity issues, and we're going to just be able to produce massive amounts of energy. And so something like that would render renewables obsolete, right? We would not need battery level grid storage or grid level battery storage. We would not need these, huge solar farms, huge wind farms that have their own ecological impact as well. And the footprint of a single, fusion reactor and, the materials that you're gathering is actually, substantially smaller, all things considered. But even barring that, again, fusion power has been 30 years away for, 70 years or however long the concept of fusion's been around. And we're still not there yet. But I mean, there are other things like geothermal. And again, thanks, Jonathan, for linking that. It was, a great read. But, being able to actually drill deep enough to tap into just the massive amount of heat energy that is everywhere underneath our feet. And I think that's an engineering problem that we can actually, manage. All you need to do is, have a pipe that runs deep enough to tap into that heat in, subterranean areas, at, kind of the edge of where the Earth's crust and the mantle sort of start to meet. And again, some of those areas are quite close to the surface, and so you have viable geothermal now. But I mean, theoretically, you could do that anywhere as long as you could drill a hole deep enough. And it's not like the hole has to be huge. You just, again, need to get, water or something, maybe molten salt or whatever else, down deep enough to capture some of that heat to create steam and run a turbine. And that's really all most energy production is you are burning something to create steam, right? And then using steam pressure to move a turbine and create electricity. And I think those are far more approachable solutions than actually installing the amount of, again, battery storage and wind and solar, which, most of the Earth is just not optimized for, and is so intermittent. You're going to have this massive installation required for battery capacity, which doesn't make sense. And so the whole concept, sorry, I just went on a long bunny trail here, but the whole concept behind Tesla, right, and battery storage, and, it's not just, the cars that Tesla, but I mean, the big thing is the batteries, right? I don't think that's actually going to be necessarily important or useful technology in the grand scheme of things going forward, any more than you consider, Duracell and Energizer batteries to be like critical infrastructure. All things considered, I mean, they're highly useful. I mean, we're not going to stop using batteries, and the battery technology will get better, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be used on such a grand scale. And so long term, I don't know that at least that aspect of Tesla is going to be viable. They do have the self-driving technology and AI, and they're apparently light years ahead on that. And I don't think there's any real dispute about that. And that is going to be huge. But I mean, that's more of a software component rather than a hardware component, right? Whether or not you can get vehicles to drive themselves, which is definitely, I think, something that is coming in the future, and it's really going to significantly change the way we live. So that's just Tesla. And when you look at SpaceX, I mean, ultimately, SpaceX is funded by government contracts, and so the fact that it's a success is because the government decided it was a success. Now, granted, they've done some outstanding innovation using off-the-shelf technology, so kudos to them, I guess. But, as far as, the mission to Mars and all that, I think it's, again, smoke and mirrors. I don't think we're going to Mars anytime soon. I don't think there's anything there that's terribly interesting for us. I don't think we're going to colonize Mars. The amount of time it would take to actually, significantly terraform Mars is, I mean, just well beyond, the time scale of human lifetimes. And so, I mean, we can't even plan, 4 years in advance, let alone lifetimes in advance to terraform a planet. Not with our current level of technology and forethought. It's not going to happen. Which isn't to say there isn't stuff out in space that is super important that we need to be pushing the boundaries on. There is, and we should. Mars is closer, and so it's kind of a more attainable goal. I don't think you gain anything by having permanent human habitation there. But there are other places like Europa and Titan and Enceladus that have subsurface oceans and massive amounts of natural hydrocarbons. And I mean, actually, a serious and significant possibility that there is some sort of, life form on those planets. Now, I mean, what type of life? I mean, it might be, glorified lichen, who knows? Or it might be something very similar to what we have around geothermal vents on the ocean floor, and something like, anemones or snails or, maybe even crabs, who knows? Anything beyond that, I mean, who can say? But the fact that there's water and, again, subsurface oceans and, tidal heating that creates, geothermal heat somewhere in those planets, I mean, you've got water, you've got energy, you've got the possibility for life, and we should be going and finding out. And the fact that there's like abundant oceans there, I mean, human habitation is far more feasible in that sort of context than, I mean, the apparent desolate desert of Mars, which doesn't seem to have a whole lot going for it. I mean, yeah, there's some ice on, I guess, the polar ice cap region, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think SpaceX is getting us there. I think SpaceX is, commercially viable potentially for, government contracts in the same way Lockheed Martin is, and they'll continue to get contracts to put things in orbit for governments around the world. And the booster recovery process that they've developed is great. It's super cool to watch, but smoke and mirrors. Starlink, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I mean, just again, are we really going to have distributed internet all over the earth based on satellites? Maybe. We'll see. It seems a lot easier to run things like fiber optic cable on the ground where we're able to walk. So like I said, I can appreciate and I get the mystique of Elon Musk as a personality, and to a certain extent, I share the excitement for the future of Twitter, and maybe the golden touch of Elon Musk will have some sort of impact on business and the environment on social media in a positive way. We shall see. But it concerns me how much he's being put on a pedestal. And every time somebody ends up on a pedestal, it feels like inevitably they will seriously and significantly disappoint the people who have placed him there. And so I would urge caution. Elon Musk is not our savior. He's not going to be. I mean, he is a businessman. He's out for himself. He is rich as sin and getting richer. And while I don't have a, moral issue with people profiting from their labor, and the guy is a genius, I'm not a fan of the increasing collection of power in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And I don't like that he's buying Twitter any more than I liked Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post. And these giant, moguls, we might call them oligarchs if they were in Russia, controlling the means of dissemination of information is profoundly dangerous. And we should democratize those outlets. And what I mean by that is they should be recognized in law as the public square that they are. And I think I made a video on Twitter and free speech previously. But again, to come full circle here, the same people who were, sort of curtly throwing the "it's a private platform" in the face of people concerned about censorship are now incredibly concerned about the fact that Twitter is a private platform, and the current oligarch in charge is no longer Jack Dorsey or whoever the board of Twitter is currently, and it's now going to be somebody they don't like. And our liberty to speak should not be contingent on whether or not the current oligarch tends to align with our particular ideology. Any more than our ability to have liberty should not be contingent on whether or not the government is enforcing our particular ideology at the barrel of a gun. And practically speaking, I don't think there's really a significant difference in how people interact with giant corporations and how they interact with their government. I mean, and giant corporations in some ways have become, and I think I've made this point previously, have become de facto government. And so I think it really is incumbent upon the people of this country to assert control of these public spaces. And I'm not talking about some sort of communist revolution, workers of the world unite and rise up and seize the means of production, so much as to say that government of, for, and by the people has the authority to set rules for the society and over public spaces. And if we decide that that is a public space, which it is, functionally speaking, then we need to decide what the rules are and align those rules with the principles of liberty and not with anybody's pet ideology or whatever it happens to be in vogue at the moment. Somebody made the point I saw online not too long ago about the number of lobotomies that were performed on people, I think around the turn of the century, and it was kind of, a procedure that was in vogue, right? And people thought it was good and helpful and necessary, right? And yet somehow, the scientific consensus at the time was just shockingly wrong. And the fact that we, at times against people's will, forcibly lobotomized them, in pursuit of one particular group of people's ideological concept of the greater good, is frightening and should be a cautionary tale for all of us. And that person was making analogies about certain procedures being discussed about being performed on children. I won't elaborate on that here. Nonetheless, again, if we're making these public spaces, these corporations adhere to the principles of liberty, right, and allowing people to exercise their own bodily autonomy and agency within the bounds of the law and within the limits of the rights of others, I think we're far less likely to end up with some sort of horrific outcome like popularized lobotomies. Did you follow that bunny trail? That's my 2 cents. Let me know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. What do you want to hear me talk about? It's been fun, inspiring, and uplifting as always. We'll see you on the next one.